Are we ready for another powerful session? We've got a lot of great speakers coming up. The next one is here in the room, and I am so excited for this session. I think the other sessions today are leading straight up into his talk. So I'm going to bring him up. Mr. J. Lauren Norris is an international leadership speaker, trainer, and coach who has delivered his message on faith, family, and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, the Congo, and the UK, and across the US, of course. His audiences have ranged from intimate groups of 14 to stadiums of 40,000. He is the author of Learn to Roar, Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, and 5 Valve Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. His work in leadership and personal growth has earned him the 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award. And J. Lauren is a founding partner of the John Maxwell team. He has been recognized as a semi-finalist in both the Toastmasters International Speech Competition and the Great American Speak Off. He's also the founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com, ThatGuySpeaks.com, and StoryPowerAcademy.com. In addition, he created and hosts StoryPower TV, Transforming Grace TV, and the Leading Leaders podcast. As a producer, J. Lauren has developed 4 television programs and podcasts featured on the OBBM TV network, World Trumpet Television, and across social media platforms. Beyond his professional achievements, Lauren and his wife Karen have been married for more than 30 years. He considers his greatest accomplishment to be his family. Proud father of 4 and Poppy to 13 grandchildren ranging in age from 2 months to 18 years. Welcome, J. Lauren. We are so excited to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I am going to let you take the stage, my friend. Take it away.
We stepped outside the chapel overlooking the lake. And as we were looking at the lake, my wife turned to me and said those 4 words that make every man tremble. We need to talk. That's as bad as turn your head and cough. I didn't know if I wanted to be sick or throw up or just be angry. But the rest of the day, it mulled over in my head, what is it we need to talk about? See, I knew that I'd been 10 years into this marriage, but I came into this marriage with an addiction. 25 years now, I've been addicted and putting my wife through the worst. I also knew that I was fat and unlovable, and she could do so much better. I was thoroughly convinced that when we talk, she's going to say, look, I found somebody better. I'm done. I'm out. It's over. I'm finished. But at the end of the day, we sat down to talk, and she took my hand in hers, and she looked me in the eye, and she said, when you say to me that you're fat and unlovable, you're asking me to believe a lie, because I know God sent you to be a gift to me. I have forgiven everything that you've done. I love you just the way you are, and I need you to see you the way I do. Those words changed my life. They saved our marriage. They probably saved my life, if I'm honest, because I've contemplated taking it more than once. And in that moment, I realized that her story of me and my story of me, they didn't jive. Now, I don't know if you know this about yourself, but it's not easy to change the story that you're telling yourself in the mirror. It's a lot easier to change the story that you tell to others about themselves, and it's even easier to change the story that they tell about you. Now, the real question is, why would you want to do that? Well, we don't reproduce what we teach. We tend to reproduce who we are. It's not all the flowery words that we say, it's the character that we become. The story is not just a once upon a time kind of thing. Story is a very powerful, moving thing, but story also shows up in weird ways. As Seth Godin says, it's not just a once upon a time thing. The apple pie at the open house is a story. Now, I don't believe that the apple pie at the open house is a story, but I do believe this. I do believe it's a trigger. I mean, think for a moment the last time you walked in and smelled warm baking apple pie. It doesn't matter if that was at grandma's house 35 years ago, or that was at your friend's house last weekend, or it was at your house Sunday morning after church. It doesn't matter when you smelled that warm apple pie. There are feelings and emotions and memories associated with that, and they're powerful. They're very powerful. And those feelings, those emotions, that's what comes up when apple pie comes up. It begins to recreate a story in your imagination. The story power method really has 4 steps. That's the story craft, the stage craft, the connection, and the narrative. And the challenge for a lot of people is they forget the importance of the narrative. Now, the part of that whole process that demands the most intention is the narrative. You've got to be very intentional about the narrative. You heard Michael talk about drawing the X and know where you're taking people. You've heard every speaker say, what is the purpose? Where's the direction? What is the end game? What is the goal? What will you help your clients transform through and into? And that question never ends. That question is absolutely critical in the relationship that you build. But it has to be embedded in the story. And it doesn't just have to be a story on its own. It can be an ideology, a phrase, a reward within the story that you're telling, a simple sentence about what that journey is going to be. If you're married and your spouse has a negative self-image, do you have any idea how much power your ability to speak a new story into them has to transform their life, to empower them to live a better life, a more excellent life? It rests in your story. It's in the ability for you to see them through new eyes that they haven't seen yet and deliver something to them. And you can tell a very short story, a few sentences even, a single declaration, and change that. But you've got to be intentional about that. But the part of the story that demands the most attention is story crafting. See, the 4-part story crafting, story craft, stage craft, connection, narrative. Story craft actually has 2 major parts, and that's how do you select the story you're going to tell? And then how do you actually build that story line by line, idea upon idea, incident upon incident? And I love the way even Ron said it. He said 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 2 minutes. I push all of my clients as hard as I can to get down to a 2-minute story. Now, the 10-second intro as a reply that leads into the 2-minute story, I got no problem with that. The 30-second answer that leads to the 2-minute story, I got no problem with that. Most people have a problem with the 2-minute story. They start talking and they can't shut up. They start down an idea and then all the rabbit trails come up and the squirrels come up and they can't get back to the core of the story. They're not even sure why they started telling it, and that becomes a problem. So the greatest level of attention, I find, has to be on that ability to say, I'm going to tell you a story on purpose. And the story that I'm going to tell you is going to push to a very specific end. And that very specific end, well, it's going to be something that moves you into transformation. It gives you an idea, it gives you an opportunity. But there's some elements of your story that, as you're building the story, they must be embedded in the story to get the quality of the story to the level that you want. And one of those key elements is what I call credential. So there are 4 of those key elements. The essential elements is what I call them. And this starts before you even select a story. You should be asking yourself, do these things appear in this story that I choose to tell? If I get out of the car and I trip over a Coke bottle, will this story, will this incident, will this moment in time create a teachable moment that includes these 4 things? If it doesn't, work on it some more. If it does, then carry on crafting the story in your imagination until it becomes a 2-minute answer to a powerful question. So here are the 4 things you got to have. Number 1 is credential. Number 2 is credibility. Number 3 is context. This is how that story is relevant to the audience you're talking to. And number 4 is actual content. How many people have heard somebody say, I'm going to tell you a story, and after they've been talking for 5 or 10 minutes, you realize there was no story there. I mean, you talked for a long period of time and you said a bunch of words, but it wasn't a story. It wasn't like a beginning, a middle, and an end. There wasn't something that happened in characters and a lesson to be learned. There was no emotion. It was just words, maybe facts, maybe details, maybe even completely accurate and true, but it wasn't a story. That's the power of the content to deliver the idea. A lot of people think I've got to tell a story and then make a point. Tell a story and then teach a thing. There's nothing wrong with that idea, but what if you only have 2 minutes, it's in the parking lot, and it's not about getting on the next podcast, it's not about getting on the stage, it's about genuinely transforming somebody else's life, maybe saving a life, rebuilding a relationship. Maybe it's all of those things rolled into one really small opportunity, one chance meeting. What if you'd already been practicing in your head a story of a moment in time that you had this grand aha? And this grand aha has the ability to pull somebody out of a funk, to maybe stop them from injuring themselves, maybe stop them from starting a fight with somebody else, or carrying on with a road rage incident, or just losing it over whatever else is going on around them. If you had the power in that moment to step into their life and go, here's this 2-minute story, and they go, wow, that is such a revelation. I hadn't thought of it like that myself. That makes you a powerful tool for transformation. More than just a storyteller, more than just a speaker, it makes you a powerful device for saving lives. And I believe in the end, that's what we all want. And what we do know is the more people we help along the way, the more we get rewarded for that. So let's talk about credentials just for a moment. Credentials not really hard, right? Dr. Susan has a whole stack of credentials. Katie has been on here. I've seen others. You can see the letters behind their names, stacks upon stacks of credentials, certifications, and trainings, and all of these things that when you see them in play, when you see them on their name, you see them on their resume, you're like, oh, they're an expert. They know what they're talking about. These are the very simple, universally recognized accomplishments, degrees, awards, certificates, official accreditations, or even endorsements. When a doctor says, I say you should work with this person because that's over my head. That's a powerful credential on both sides, both the person who's referring to go, I know my lane and that's not it, and the person that they send you to go, they're better at that thing, but when you need XYZ, come back to me because that's my specialty, not theirs. That's a powerful credential. But what about the next step, and that's credibility? See, the purpose of the story is to articulate this, as Seth Godin says it. People like us do work like this. We do things like this. And when people hear you tell a story, I work with a nonprofit organization here in Dallas-Fort Worth that feeds about 5,000 homeless people every year. I've been on their advisory board. I've served with the team. I've been a volunteer. I provide AV services to them in the past. I spend a lot of time coaching the president of the organization on storytelling. This organization's mission statement is really simple: to love the homeless and the underprivileged. Now, around the world, by this Christmas, they plan to put shoes on 70,000 children. 1,000 kids in 70 different countries, in addition to what they're doing in the U.S. They've got to raise a lot of money to buy that many shoes. That's a lot of work. But what are the stories they tell about what they've done in the past? People like us do work like this. If you invest in us, if you support us, if you volunteer with us, if you give to us, that's what you can expect your money to go to. That doesn't seem super complicated. And yet sometimes we end up telling stories, marketing stories, et cetera, that have nothing to do with what we've actually achieved. And so the credibility piece kind of goes out the window. It's great to have all the accolades and the certifications and the awards. It's even better to have the ability to say, I learned how to do it and I've actually done it and it worked. This is not just a certificate, but these are stories that demonstrate the mastery of the thing that your diploma says you actually learned. Now, I love the way, again, this is a Seth Godin quote. He says, never tell a story just for the sake of telling a story. I add to that and say, rather, tell a story that connects people to the narrative you intend to lead. The narrative of our nonprofit example is we help homeless and underprivileged children. How do we do that? Well, there's a lot of ways we do that. Food, clothes, backpacks, shoes, washing of their feet, serving them anywhere in the world. It's pretty consistent over and over. But each individual story that's told in their marketing, in their fundraising, in their relationship building, each of those stories goes back to that one major point. People like us do work like this. Here's the proof. And so every story leads to that narrative. If you go back to Michael's concept or even Ron's concept, what he said was when you get on the podcast, be ready to answer the questions so that people know what you do and they know how you can work with them. That's a powerful thing. And finally, content. A good story should be told more than once because of the value that it adds to the mission, the narrative, and the listener. If you're telling a story and it's just entertaining to you, or you're telling a story that has nothing to do with the content. I was in a meeting one day when the guy stood to the front and he said, I have a master's degree in communications from XYZ University, and I'm here to present to you today the power of strong communication. And I was like, awesome. I grabbed my notebook. Yes, I have 9 pages of notes from the last 2 days of the stuff that we've been studying together. And I said, I am all in. I opened my notebook. I was ready to take notes. And then he said, I have a story to tell you. It really doesn't have anything to do with what I'm teaching, but I think you'll find it fascinating. 9 minutes later, he stopped talking. Nobody applauded. Nobody laughed. A couple of people nodded off, the academic nod. And then they looked up at him and he said, well, I guess that story wasn't as fascinating to you as it was to me, but it has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about anyway, so I'll move on. And he did. And I turned to my friend and I said, any chance we can get our 9 minutes back? Because that wasn't just not good, it absolutely was a waste of time. Now, when you've got a story that you realize when you tell that 2-minute story, that incident, that thing that happened that supports your narrative, it's in the context of the audience you're talking to. It, in the story, demonstrates credibility. In the story, demonstrates your credential. And in that 1-2 minute window, people go, wow, I love what you do. I want to be a part of it. Repeat that story as often as you can in front of as many audiences as you can, because you're going to get a different outcome from different audiences. Some people in the crowd, let's say the crowd is 2,000 people, 200 people, 20 people, you're going to find that there are people within that crowd that resonate. There's a crowd, and then there's an audience, and those are different. And when you begin to differentiate the two in your mind, you'll see a completely different result in your outcome. When you realize not everybody's your customer, we know that from marketing, right? We can't serve everybody, so serve the ones that you do serve really, really well. The 2-minute story can actually help you to do that, and we'll talk about that in part 2. But the same story to a different audience, different impact, is going to have different results. And like any other good marketing, you've got to tell it 7 times. Now, I'm going to give you a free bonus right here in the middle. There's 4 categories of stories. 4 categories. You're going to want to write these down. There's sticky stories, timeless stories, impactful stories, and opinionated stories. They each serve a different purpose, and they each have a different kind of a flavor to the story itself. The first one, sticky stories, these are usually tied to trending topics. Think of them like this. It's a current event. It's something that everybody's talking about in the news. It's all over TikTok and social media. It's the water cooler talk. If your story is relative to that, that's going to be a powerful story because it's already in the mind of everybody, and all you're doing is building the juxtaposition of your story in reference to that. Number 2 is a timeless story. This is the kind of story that's never not true. You can talk about a past event with a client, a past success that you've had. We heard Deb talk about being on all kinds of different celebrity red carpets, being there for Emmys and Oscars, et cetera, et cetera. But we also heard, let me look at my notes. Before that, she talked, was it Katie? I know I wrote it down. Yeah, before Deb, she talked about getting on The Organizer. Talked about being on all of these shows, Oprah and all these other shows as an organizer. And everybody's like, organization gets you on television? Yeah, if you're good at what you do. But see, that story is timeless. It never grows old. Why? Because it's always about media. It's always about success. It's always about the credibility. This is what I've done. That's a timeless story. You should keep telling that story over and over and over again. Even if it's 25 years later, it is a success that is marked, distinguishable, and provable. Impactful stories. Impactful stories provoke personal passions. These are emotional stories. When you tell the story, you see the tears, you see the laughter, you see people light up, you see people get jazzed up, you can see the energy in their body because the story you're telling is impactful to them. It's personal. It moves them. It provokes them to say, yes, like that. And then the opinionated story. Now, here's something you may or may not want to know about opinionated stories. I really don't care, it's my opinion. Truth is, they're magnetic. When you share your opinion, there are going to be some people who are like, whoa, yeah, not for me. And others are like, that's my kind of person. You're my kind of people. When you hide your opinions, they come up later and they become a challenge. Now, if you're one of the few people, and I only know a few people, who you couldn't get their opinion out of them if you squeezed them. You could run over them with a steamroller and what comes out would not contain their opinion. They are not going to let you have it. They will never tell you what their opinion is. And for many of those people, they're just blank slates. They're hard to deal with in that way. I was in Brazil. I'm on the floor, foot to foot with my translator. His head is one way, my head is the other way, and we're both doing push-ups. I'm counting, we're both doing push-ups. I'm counting in English, he's translating into Portuguese. And after about 10 push-ups, I prop my head on my elbow and keep counting, and he keeps doing push-ups. After we get to about 15 or 20 push-ups, the crowd in Portuguese is starting to harass him, and they're going, dude, he's not even doing push-ups anymore. They're looking at me like, who does that? Why would you count and make him do push-ups? Now, you got to know my translator, unlike me, old and round, he was beautiful. He was over 6 foot. He was a dark Brazilian. He was a beautiful, chiseled features, very good shape. He could have probably done 500 push-ups and not even sweated. But after about 25 push-ups, they finally convinced him, dude, get up. This guy's just counting, and you're the only one doing push-ups. He stood up, and we high-fived each other and looked at the crowd, and we kind of laughed. And then I looked at the crowd, and I said, how many of you this morning did a workout? See, I was in Brazil speaking to 200 leaders of businesses, entrepreneurs who are faith-based. I was there with a missions team. They asked me to go because I'm a certified John Maxwell coach, because I've been to Cuba and I've done training in the Congo, and I've done a lot of stuff with missions. And so when they said, come speak in Brazil to these small business leaders who are trying to figure out how to put their business and their faith together, and we'd love you to work on some of this John Maxwell stuff, I thought of one of John Maxwell's favorite quotes, and that is, you can't pay somebody else to do your push-ups. You can't delegate what makes you grow. You got to grow on your own. You got to do that yourself. And so as I'm doing push-ups, and I'm making the point to them, him doing the push-ups and me doing the counting doesn't make me grow at all. And the crowd really landed with that. We had a great time of about an hour and a half of working together on what does it mean to develop leadership and delegate well. Now, if you were to think back about the first 4 that I gave you, the 4 essential elements, credential, credibility, context, and content, can you look at the story that I just told about push-ups in Brazil and go, yeah, all of those are in there? Then that's a well-crafted story. And that's the point that I want to make. I want you to be able to craft stories that you can tell in 2 minutes or so. That one took about 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Yes, I'm timing it. But the ability to tell that story in 2 minutes and contain credibility, credential, context, and content is the ability to answer a quick question in a podcast, in a conversation, in a parking lot. If somebody stops and says, hey, I saw you on the news the other day, and I'm curious, could you help me with XYZ? Bam, can you answer that without a 45-minute dialogue? All right, here's the next 4. I hope you're ready. These are the 4 prime objectives. Remember, we're still in story selection. As you're looking for the stories that you want to tell, how do we select the events from our life? Ask yourself, do they qualify this way? These are the 4 prime objectives of telling a good story. Number 1, express opinions. Number 2, expose core values. Number 3, pick perfect people. And number 4, portray promises. So what does it mean to express opinions? Well, you heard me say earlier, opinions are magnetic. They're either going to repel people or they're going to attract people. If you're not okay with that, then you might still be in the mindset that I can serve everybody. The minute you start allowing your story to narrow down your audience from crowd to audience, you'll even find when you go from the 5,000 to the 12 that you'll find the 3 or the 1 who are just die-hard, ride-or-die kind of clients. They believe in you completely. They are sold out to your ability to deliver, and they're going to be there every time. And those people are going to refer you quickly and often. Listening to a podcast of intellectuals earlier, I recently heard somebody say, I thought it was a very pithy comment, but it was also very powerful. He said, I have passionate opinions loosely held. Passionate opinions loosely held. Well, I've said it all of my life. I have very strong opinions. I have ideas and conclusions that I've come to through my own research, my own study, and my own life experiences. And the truth is, some of them are wrong. And I've got to be mature enough to say, okay, this is what I thought for this period of time, and so proved me wrong. So-and-so said something, and I had to change the way I look at it. You heard Michael earlier give you a structure for a speech. It's a very successful structure. Pete Vargas has something very similar called the signature talk. It has an opening heart story, it has the connection to the brain, it has the closing heart story, and a call to action. And if you craft that speech and you can give it the same way every time, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 2 minutes, you've got a powerful way of communicating with people because your narrative doesn't change. That's very important to know. Politics and pop culture, these things polarize the public narrative, but you've got to stay true to your own narrative. First, you got to figure out what that is. Opinions form the narrative which you wish to lead, and they therefore determine the stories that you select. Number 2, expose core values. There are a lot of things about your core values that when you put them on the table, they're like opinions, they're like socks. Some people smell them and think that's horrible, and some look at it and go, I can cope with that. Sometimes just telling your core values through the course of a story, somebody's like, again, those are my kind of people. I want to be like that one day, or I already think like that. We should do business together. We should hang out together. As you've heard said several times in the course of this teaching, we should be in the room together because we're the same kind of people. Trust me, when your energy is based on your core values, there's a whole lot of synergy that goes along with that, and it magnifies in a room where other people have the same values. If you can slip those core values into your story in a way that they don't offend other people, that takes a lot of work, and in a way that they don't wound other people, and that takes a lot of intention, then you can slip those core values in, and people will either hear them and go, not for me, or hear them and go, oh, please, more of that. How refreshing. That's a challenging thing to do, and it takes a lot of attention and a lot of intention, and if you don't do it, you're going to create something else. Seth Godin says, we too often just fall into who our customers are, and that's a mistake. If you're not firing customers, you're not serious about choosing your customers, and therefore not serious about your business. This brings us to number 3, pick perfect people. Well, you can't, because there aren't any. What you can do is get to know the audience that you're about to be presenting to, that crowd. Know who the crowd is, and then know who the audience is, the group of people you want to deal with, because that's who you serve best. That's who you get the best results for. And then think of them and think through their eyes and through their ears as you're crafting the story. If you heard that story, would you be all in? Or if you heard that story, would you be completely pushed away? And if you can balance those two, then you can identify in a crowd who the perfect people in your audience are. Speak in the terms of their interest. Dale Carnegie has been saying this for over 100 years. Speak in the terms of the other person's interest. If you've heard somebody get on the platform and talk, and they say things that you're like, whoa, yeah, I can't believe you just said that out loud. And at the end, they might say something like, well, I'm just being authentic. I'm just being transparent. You're like, no, you're being offensive because you don't care what I think about what you said. You just said what you wanted to say. Now, one of the things about picking perfect people, Kevin Kelly, I didn't write down the name of the book. You can look it up, though. Kevin Kelly said, if you have 1,000 true fans, you'll never have to worry about monetization again. If you have 1,000 true fans, you'll never have to worry about monetization again. Now think about what that means. 1,000 true fans are going to tell another 1,000 true fans. They're going to talk about your business. They're going to talk about the success they've had working with you. They're going to talk about what they heard from you that moved them. And they're going to be moved to take action. That's a powerful thing. And if you can do that on a regular basis, you're going to win. Those 1,000 people, if they're true fans, not fly-by-night fans, they got that one product, they bought it, they signed up on your site, they spent X number of dollars, and then you never heard from them again. They never took action, so they never got real results. They bought the product, but they didn't employ it. How many people have online courses people have signed up for, and then you never see them even log in? Don't just pick your audience based on the most desirable attributes, like their wealth, success, or money. The path to the smallest viable audience is not a shortcut to reach as many people as possible, but it's a direct path to helping someone to whom you can make a difference, someone to whom you can matter. I love Seth Godin's other quote. He says, shortcuts aren't. There's no such thing, and they never work. Portray promises. I'm going to close with this story. I had a phone call. I'm setting up for another event, and as my phone rings, I don't recognize the number, so I silence it and I put it back. My phone rings again. Same number. I silence it and put it back. Third time. This is all within like a minute. I'm so frustrated, perturbed, and annoyed. I finally answer, and I'm like, "This is Lauren." I'm like, "What do you want?" That was my... And the person on the other line says, "Is this J. Lauren Norris?" And I said, "Yes." Well, only people in the speaking world know that name. So when they said, "Is this J. Lauren Norris?" I said, "Yes." And my tone changed a little bit. And they said, "Well, so-and-so," who was a client at the time, said that you were incredible at speech writing, and I need to know if you can help me. And I'm like, "Well, I'm setting up for an event. Can I perhaps call you on Monday?" And they said, "No, I just need a yes or no. Can you help me with this?" And I said, "Help you with what?" They said, "I have to speak in front of the Supreme Court on the topic of abortion, and I only have 3 minutes. Can you help me with that?" Whoa, 3 minutes in front of the Supreme Court on the topic of abortion. That's a big ask. If you've ever heard the old phrase that says, if I've got 2 hours to speak, I can go now. If I've got 20 minutes to speak, give me a couple of weeks to prepare. If I've got 5 minutes to speak, give me a couple of months to prepare, because I've got to figure out what to whittle out. 3 minutes in front of the Supreme Court on a topic like abortion? Oh my gosh, that's a big ask. Well, we finished that talk. She knocked it out of the park. She calls me back a few months later and says, "Now I have to deliver a 3-minute talk on the topic of abortion in front of the United Nations, and I don't want to use the same speech." So we did it again. She knocked it out of the park. Now she's been asked to speak for a fundraiser. And she said, "I'm following Tim Tebow's mother and Tim Tebow's wife and a lady who survived abortion, and they've raised over $250,000. We've got coaching sessions coming up in the next few weeks to prepare her for that talk." That's a big ask. Now let me ask you the question. Do you have any idea what my position is on that topic? No, because I didn't tell you. You didn't ask. I didn't tell you. But here's what I do find. When you make core value expressions, when you talk about your opinions, when you throw it out there to pick the perfect people, when you portray the promises, I can help you write that speech at the highest level. Then you know for a fact that you can deliver on the promise that's been portrayed. And that's part 4 of that 4-part prime objectives. And if I can help you with any of those, I would love to. My name is J. Lauren Norris with STORYPOWER Academy, and you'll find on the dashboard that we've offered a free access to the STORYPOWER Journal Starter Kit, which will walk you through the STORYPOWER method to get started crafting your own stories better, so you can tell better stories better. I encourage you to go to STORYPOWERacademy.com and check it out. Look at the different classes, the different levels, the different things that are available. You can take a lot of them a la carte. But spend some time there and see if that's the kind of thing that would change the way you communicate as a leader, as a pastor, as a counselor, as a political leader. And if that will help you, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Again, only 10 people in the elite speakers. You will have to apply for that. But if you're a candidate, I'd love to have that conversation with you. I'm J. Lauren Norris with STORYPOWER Academy. I look forward to seeing you inside.